Over the past year, we've gone from horror games to horrors beyond our comprehension, Sonic's big letdown to Godzilla's glow up, the most peaceful game on the planet to the most stressful game on the planet, from mind-bending puzzles to PS1 fever dreams. It's been a journey, but now it's time to look back and answer the big question: which games truly stood out? This is it. For the last time this season, I'm Joe, your ex-gaming industry pro, and today, we're ranking every single game we've reviewed, from all-time greats to ones that haunt me in my sleep. Stick around until the very end to find out what comes next for this channel. For now, let's get into the rules of this tier list. Here is the tier list, brought to you by the website also responsible for tier lists like Ultimate Smash or Pass and Ranking Baddies. So think about it like this: S tier is reserved for absolute baddies in terms of games, and Just No is reserved for games you shouldn't touch unless it's for comedic purposes. And obviously, my personal bias is going to be the main factor here. There are some absolute classics mixed with some bizarre niche picks, so be prepared for some takes that'll force you into the comment section to call me an ice dweller. Okay, we're gonna go in chronological order, starting all the way back with Still Wakes the Deep. Still keeps me up at night. How that's a C. Reason why that's a C is because the story saved it. The story was actually quite good. However, I felt like it was a glorified walking simulator with a bit of otherworldly horrors beyond our comprehension. It also gets deducted 1 playthrough time point for having yellow paint. Godzilla Save the Earth, solid B. Does what it does. It's a fighting game. It's got all of Godzilla's pals like Godzilla and Pomeranian, Dragonite. But on a real note, it just does what it does. There was nothing really of note that I remembered about the game. Metro 2033 Redux. S. Now the reason why this gets into S is because the story was so good that it stayed with me for so long. Some would say I was holding space with that. Why did I hit my mic? The gameplay was good, the graphics were really nice. I literally think the only problem I had with the game was where a demon kept picking me up and dropping me down again and again repeatedly. So it's an S. Eminem's Shell Shocked. Now you'll be shell shocked to find out it's all the way at S. No, it's not. It's at Just No. And the reason why it's at Just No is because the game was awful. I genuinely don't see any reason to play this game except for comedic purposes and to hear a bit of Philip Fry and J. Jonah Jameson. Jameson or Jameson? Which one is it? A Short Hike. Unfortunately, a C. The reason for this is just because the game didn't really grab me. The person made a very, very relaxing game. However, because there was no challenge and nothing to go towards, no real set goal, I wasn't drawn in by it very much. High praise all round, except for me, it has to go in C because I didn't see myself playing it very long. Deadpool, everyone's favourite merc with a mouth, has to go in B. It was like a really weird Temu knockoff of Arkham. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a hack and slash that does what it does well. However, the storyline was a bit and the guy gets old pretty quick, to be honest with you. Vigilante 8, unfortunately a D. It's the king of a genre that does not exist anymore. The closest you can probably get is something like Wreckfest. Unfortunately, this game, the gameplay, the graphics, the music, the voice acting, all of it is just really, really old. Alien vs Predator on the SNES. B. It's so simple in its gameplay that it can't get a lot wrong. The only thing I would say it gets wrong is that the bosses can absolutely cheese you. Everything else is pretty solid. Next is Go Mecha Ball, which will go alongside A Short Hike, as again, it was a game that was so unique. A roguelike pinball shooter? Brilliant. However, I found that when I went back to play it after filming the video, it did not grab me whatsoever. I feel like the novelty wears off after the first 3 runs, and then you just can't be bothered with it anymore. However, such a unique premise and idea, so C. Over Magica. Unfortunately for this game, I'm gonna have to put it at a D. It promised a lot with its premise being Pokemon cross Stardew Valley. However, it felt like it was a jack of all trades, master of none. I also felt like the art style wasn't really my type of thing. However, I will say this was made by one person, so this has to be the harshest D I have ever given. Phrasing on that one, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, an absolute masterpiece that was underappreciated. No, it wasn't. I had high hopes coming into Sonic the Hedgehog 2006, and they were dashed fairly quickly. The game's pretty boring and frustrating. On top of that, the storyline is all over the place, and it almost becomes satire. However, the main reason it's in D and maybe should be brought down to just no, you know Sonic, the blue anthropomorphic hedgehog, you know he's in love with a human princess that looks like she's about 10 out of 10 writing. As Hideo Kojima would put it, a true Hideo game. Now to completely contrast that, we're going with Rising Zan, which is an A. The game does not take itself seriously, it's so much fun. It's just limited by the amount of times you need to mash some buttons. Star Trucker at a B. The reason why this is a B is pretty much just down to personal bias. I do not like simulators. However, the game looked amazing. It had such a unique premise in that it's a truck sim but in space, and I gotta give it credit for that. I do not like uber realistic simulation games. Oh, you need to change your battery every 20 minutes. You need to go to the bathroom in a minute. But that is not a discredit on Star Trucker itself. Dragon Ball Raging Blast 2 fits nicely alongside Star Trucker in B. The graphics actually hold up surprisingly well. The game is pretty fun. However, because it's a fighting game and that requires a level of skill that I do not possess, it's gonna go in B because I felt like I couldn't enjoy it to its fullest because I couldn't even get past the tutorial. Again, not a diss on Raging Blast 2, it's a diss on myself. Also, there being no proper story mode as well sort of limits it to a B. Now we move on to Gregory Horror Show, which has had a horror show and only ended up in C. Such a unique premise based on a anime, I think, that barely anyone knows. The game is what Redditors would call a hidden gem. However, the difficulty ramps up way too much when guests get introduced to the house, and then it just gets frustrating rather than fun. I would also say that the game's really slow. And talking about hidden gems that I enjoyed, Tokyo Jungle with an A. You guys all know that I love breeding to continue my bloodline and going out there and fighting a pack of bears, and this game allowed me to do that, but in the safety of my own home. On a real note though, this game was so unique and so fun. The gameplay loop was really addictive, and the controls were pretty simple and easy to pick up. I think the only thing limiting it from becoming an S was maybe partially the graphics, partially the replayability. I feel like once you go through the loop a couple of times, you start losing the novelty of it. Ultimate Spider-Man swings in at a C. Now you'd think with the name Spider-Man behind them, they could make something amazing, but instead they nailed the movement mechanics and sort of disregarded everything else. That's a bit harsh. The gameplay loop was pretty fun, but I feel as if the game got old fairly quickly. And the storyline required you to have read the comics to understand it, as far as I'm aware. Or they just put a load of random things together and just went, it's a story. This is what happens now. Cat in the Hat. If it was the movie, I would put it at an S. It is a perfect movie to watch, as long as you're not taking it too seriously. However, the game failed to live up to the movie's outstanding reputation. The game's a D. The reason why it's a D and not a just no is because it's a sort of serviceable platformer. However, in terms of everything else, we've got Mike Myers, but from Cameo. we've got no collision detection whatsoever, and we've got Alec Baldwin flying a UFO with some of the worst boss battles in history. Neon white. In complete contrast, it goes all the way up to A. This game made speedrunning fun. It had a really cool concept with people coming from hell to fight demons in heaven. It got so much right, including the soundtrack, the graphics, all of it. However, it does not get an S due to the cringy dialogue that came out of it. It's just fan service turned up to 11 and it comes off really cringy. Incredible Crisis. Incredibly, this game is a B. Reason why it's a B? Simple. It's WarioWare with worse gameplay but a much better premise. The mini games are hit and miss, the story is really fun, and the whole premise behind it is amazing. It's so bizarre, and it actually got me laughing. Looking at you, Deadpool. Tale Concerto. Let me tell you a tale of a game that ended up in B. The only thing I feel Tale Concerto got right was that nostalgic Saturday morning cartoon feeling. I didn't play Tale Concerto when I was young, but somehow I felt nostalgia playing it and some sort of warmth. However, the gameplay was bad, the story was bad, the camera was bad. There wasn't really much to keep me going in that world. Now the opposite, a world I don't want to go to but I enjoyed the gameplay of, Bulletstorm, coming in at A. Pretty much the same thing as Deadpool, where it's just, it gets what it does right well, even though what it does right is pretty mindless. However, I really enjoyed the unique ways you could kill different enemies, and it didn't come with really terrible jokes. It was almost like a satire of something like Gears of War, so it worked really well because it wasn't taking itself seriously. Whereas Deadpool, even though it doesn't take itself seriously, it was taking itself seriously. Does that make sense? Now on to a game that had a lot of depth to it, depending on how you looked. Superliminal. This game is an easy A. The story was super trippy, the art style was art, soundtrack was great, pretty much everything about it was good, and the main selling point being the way you solved the puzzles was really, really good. However, that was also its demise, and the reason why it didn't go to S. Some of the puzzles really pushed that outside the box thinking to the point where no one could have solved that. Let me just get Albert Einstein on the phone and say, yo, how do you solve this puzzle in Superliminal? He says, oh, you go up there and you spawn an apple on the top. Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Possibly the most legendary game on this entire list. Some people consider it the greatest game of all time. I've put it at an A. Now hear me out before you get the pitchfork and the torches out, or in my case, the dislikes and the unsubscribes. I can see why people think this is one of the greatest games of all time. However, for me personally, it was slow. And I'm not saying it was so slow that I was sitting here yawning and playing Pokemon Pocket. It was mainly all the backtracking and all the traveling places without sprinting. However, I don't think I got the full experience when I did the video review on it. I genuinely feel if I were to play this game again, but without the pressure of recording and making notes, I might have considered it an S. Now, a controversial game, Resident Evil 5. Possibly one of the most controversial Resident Evils out there. I put it at a B. A lot of people don't consider it to be a true Resident Evil game. I sort of agree. However, for what it is, which is almost a campy action flick, it does it so well. The only reason it's at a B and not an A or an S, I feel like the controls are outdated. And on top of that, some of the boss fights are not good. I'm talking like full unrealistic. And I hear you, you're saying, Joe, of course a giant bat monster is unrealistic. However, if the giant bat monster was in real life and in my area, I wouldn't be able to walk slightly to the left and avoid it, and then it would have to realign like a tank. Home Alone, straight to Just No. If you watched the first part of my Christmas special, you'll know why. It's a whole game about putting traps down and then just waiting. That isn't fun. That leads us on to part 2 of our Christmas special, The Grinch. D, because it had a bit of a charm to it. A little bit. The voice actor was not trying to do a Jim Carrey impression, and I'd been told by a decent amount of people that the game was good back in its day. But when I played it, I could not see it, and to make matters worse, it crashed like instantly. And there were mosquitoes that looked like that guy off the Regular Show. I think it's the Regular Show. Like he's like a pinball guy. Gigabash is an A. The reason why it doesn't quite hit S is because it was quite unbalanced and it sort of didn't have that longevity to it. However, it pretty much did what Save the Earth did, but better, and it looked better doing it, with all of these legendary iconic characters looking faithful and acting faithful. No cheating on your wife, Ghidorah. Finally, to finish it all off, we've got another entry in the Dragon Ball franchise. Unfortunately, coming in at a C because this one was not as good as Raging Blast 2. It tried to do something different and it failed. On top of that, having a Dragon Ball game with no offline split screen and no offline versus mode is almost like a sin, especially when you don't have much else to offer. So, there we have it, my definitive ranking of every game we reviewed this season. Putting these games into tiers wasn't easy. They're all so different that, honestly, the list itself might not mean much, but the journey was fun. If you're curious about what comes next, stick around. For everyone else who's been along for the ride, thank you. None of this would have been possible without your support, and I can't express how much I appreciate it. Have a great one, and I'll see you soon. Now, for the rest of you, about this being the end of the season. When this video drops, I'll be in America on a trip, but Christmas gave me a lot of time to reflect. I've realized I've hit a bit of a wall with my review content. I love making these videos, but it feels like it's time to try something new. Once I'm back, I might take a short break, just a week or so, to make sure I nail this first episode of the new season. I'm genuinely excited about this new idea, and I think you will be too. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe. Thank you, Bergamo. And let me know in the comments which game deserved its spot, or where I messed up. Have a good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, and I'll see you next season.